Tonight we debate the latest Republican debate. Donald Trump, Ted Cruz squaring off, and everyone teeing off on, yes, President Obama. Then Governor Cuomo, he's pushing to provide education for inmates. It's a controversial proposal. We'll discuss both sides of the issue. Also, the Navy has made budget cuts, but does that cut into its readiness to protect us? We'll meet the former top Navy officer who's worried the answer is yes. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Now, the GOP presidential contenders, they faced off on the debate stage for the first time in 2016. Showdown in Charleston, South Carolina. It turned into a food fight between Donald Trump and Ted Cruz. 7 GOP presidential candidates, one debate stage, and no lack of attacks. First up, President Obama, fresh off of Tuesday's State of the Union address.
President Obama didn't so much as mention the 10 sailors that had been captured by Iran.
On Tuesday night, I watched Story Time with Barack Obama.
A high-profile effort to persuade voters before the February 1st Iowa caucuses. The gloves coming off between Donald Trump and Ted Cruz, this bromance apparently over. A testy exchange between the two candidates about accusations that Cruz might not be legally able to serve as president because of his Canadian roots.
You have great constitutional lawyers that say you can't run.
I'm not going to be taking legal advice from Donald Trump.
You don't have to.
Cruz also forced to defend a new report that says he didn't tell the Federal Election Commission about a $1 million loan from Wall Street banks for a Senate campaign.
I made a paperwork error disclosing it on one piece of paper instead of the other.
Cruz then throwing more jabs at Trump, attacking his chief rival's conservative credentials by saying he represents New York values.
Not a lot of conservatives come out of Manhattan.
Trump called the jab insulting, and he praised New York's response to 9/11.
When the World Trade Center came down, I saw something that no place on earth could have handled more beautifully, more humanely than New York.
And there was applause after that. In fact, one guy clapping included was Ted Cruz. We'll talk about him in a second. But gun control was also a major topic last night, and one more right wing than the following.
Are there any circumstances that you think we should be limiting gun sales of any kind in America?
No. I am a Second Amendment person. If we had guns in California on the other side, where the bullets went in the different direction, you wouldn't have 14 or 15 people dead right now. The guns don't pull the trigger. It's the people that pull the trigger, and we have to find out what is going on.
I am convinced that if this president could confiscate every gun in America, he would. I am convinced that this president, if he could get rid of the Second Amendment, he would.
In New Jersey, what we have done is to make it easier now to get a conceal and carry permit. We have made it easier to do that, not harder.
Okay. Richard St. Paul, he is an attorney, Republican strategist, and a former vice chair for the National Black Republican Association. Across the table is Dominic Carter, political journalist and author, and, of course, Andrew Whitman, senior political correspondent. Okay, guys, before we get into the guns, how dare Ted Cruz play the New York card when that fraud came to Goldman Sachs, right, looking for money for the campaign and everything else. I guarantee you, he already has been. He will be back to New York before the Republican convention, and if he is so fortunate, before the general election to raise money. So for that guy to say that, basically New York need not apply, he sure can take the money. I find myself gagging when I say this, but I'm with Donald Trump. In fact, I even saw Bill de Blasio saying that one. But he's right. How dare these frauds dump all over New York and at the same time come here hat in hand? I remember this distinctly after 9/11 when New York City was trying to get funding, forget even Zadroga, when they were just trying to get funding to rebuild after 9/11 after the attacks. There was a lot of lawmakers saying basically New York can be fine for itself. Forget that we send more to Washington and comes back. I got to tell you, Dom, I know politics is politics and stuff, but I'm glad at least Trump answered the way he did. That was outrageous what Cruz tried to play.
It's outrageous, but Richard, the fact is
predictable, which is the sadder part.
But it's something that Republicans, not just Republicans, candidates outside of New York have done for years. They all rally against New York. And when I say New York is defined as the Northeast, the whole corridor. Mm-hmm. This is what they do. Those liberals in New York, pro-choice, all the money, everything that's wrong with government. They're wasting all our dollars on those people and those social programs. That's a mentality.
But tell me where I go to get a check.
Of course, ka-ching. Of course. It's called being a total hypocrite, a total phony.
And to be fair, Peter King, Republican from Long Island, said the same. But, I did notice the crowd. They gave the Trump answer, a thunderous applause, including Ted Cruz, by the way, was clapping along, cementing the fraud standard. But let's stay on Ted Cruz for a second. Explain to me how it was completely fair game that Obama, though an American citizen, right, had to prove his birther status, his status to the birthers out there. Well, Ted Cruz acknowledges he was born in Canada. That's not a fair question. Some of the same conservative talking heads who were saying that Obama was a Muslim, that he wasn't an American citizen. No, don't worry, you don't need to answer this question, Ted Cruz. Lay off already, Donald. Why isn't, if it was fair for Obama 8 years ago, why isn't it fair now for Cruz?
Well, it is fair for Cruz because you've seen Donald Trump bring it up. Now, whether or not it's getting traction or not is a different thing. And whether or not it's, as Donald Trump mentioned in the debate, he says, well, yeah, Ted Cruz wasn't doing as well as he was now. Now I'm bringing it up. And there was a lawsuit, I understand, recently filed to contest Ted Cruz citizenship. So we'll see, what happens with that. But it is fair game.
But let me ask you, counselor, because you're an attorney here, isn't it, forget that I think it's silly, whether or not he was born in Canada here. I think it shouldn't disqualify him to be a president. But legally, by statute, it seems to be a legitimate question right now.
Okay, natural born citizen. The Constitution is clear. Natural born citizen in the United States. Yeah, seems to be clear. His mother was, my understanding, his mother was a citizen of the U.S., so it may not matter where he was born because he'd still be a U.S. citizen, right? But the Constitution is very clear. And to your point, it is part of the fodder. Anything, apparently, in a Republican debate, unfortunately, is fair game. Including whether or not you stab somebody, like Ben Carson accusing of stabbing somebody when he was younger.
Remember, Ted Cruz did have dual citizenship and had to renounce it a couple of years ago after he was elected to the Senate. So there is, look, I'd like to see this thing actually go before the court. Not because I think
once and for all, right?
Right, just to settle it and figure out what exactly qualifies you or disqualifies you from being president of the United States. It's different than we had with John McCain, who was born in an American protectorate in the Canal Zone. It's different than George Romney, who was born in Mexico but born to two American parents. So this is another version of that because it's one American and one Cuban, and who's born in Canada.
Yep.
So why not have the case adjudicated?
Who won last night? I've heard different accounts of it. Some people said, even though the exchange that Trump and Cruz had over the citizenship and all that, maybe people thought that Cruz got the better of it, but what were they debating? They were debating whether or not he was a legitimate candidate or not. And I certainly think Trump got the better of it when it came to the exchange over New York. Overall, who do you think did better?
Well, Rudy Giuliani said that Donald Trump won, and this is one time where I have to agree with Giuliani solely based on this premise, Richard. If you're the clear front runner, and I mean, it's contested in Iowa and New Hampshire, but if you're the front runner and no one lays a glove on you, then you've won. And so Trump wins by default, if you will.
I agree with that. Trump, he didn't lose any points in that.
It was palpable, Richard, though, the frustration on the stage, not just by Kasich, who couldn't get a word in, but even the Rubios, even the Bushes. They felt yet again there's an opportunity where we don't talk about anything of any substance here, and we get so overshadowed that the only thing people will talk about tomorrow, meaning today, is going to be Cruz and Trump and who won the food fight. That's right. It is getting a little late, right?
Well, it is getting a little late, but thankfully the stage is narrowing down so you can start paying attention. Once it narrowed down even more, you'll get less of the theatrics because remember, we're talking about a 24-hour news cycle. So this is the stuff that makes the headlines, the back and forth, more than the issues. Once we get down to 2 and 3 people, then we'll get serious about the issues.
But the problem, and I thought Cruz and Trump both won, and I think the rest of the field is running, frankly, stupid campaigns. Because they don't want to attack Trump and Cruz because they figure at some point voters are going to shy away from them, and I want to be the top mainstream guy. Except that's not going to get you anywhere unless you start taking down the lead of Trump and Cruz. And I'd like to see somebody from that middle pack of the field actually take on these guys, actually start challenging Donald Trump. It seems like everybody's afraid to do that, and I'm not sure why they're so afraid. They're fighting amongst themselves for third place right now. Third place isn't going to get it done. I mean, it's getting late early.
The other thing is most people up there everybody up there except for Trump has a record in government. So it makes it easier for Trump to do their op research and say, well, you voted for this. Nobody can do that with Trump. That's why he still gets away with, I'm going to make it great. I'm going to build the most dynamic wall ever.
And they're paying for it.
The economy is going to be so wonderful because I have no track record to say otherwise.
Could you tell me how you're going to do that? Could you lay out a plan so that people can actually judge it? Where are those questions from Rubio or Christie or Kasich?
Not at this point in time. The field has to narrow before you start focusing on that.
I don't know.
It's going to narrow in the wrong direction for those guys.
I also know this. It may play some of the stuff I heard last night in a primary, Don, but not one of them said anything rational that the general public believes on guns. I'm talking the mainstream, not the base. They didn't have anything they'd want to curtail, like nothing. I just think last night Hillary was putting her feet up saying, this helps. But we'll see.
I don't know, Richard. There's some parts of the country where just the opposite of what we think, they're like, bravo.
I'm talking plurality.
That's that New York value
Yeah,
you're talking
right.
about. Those New York liberal values.
I'll let you get last word. That was pretty good.
Well played.
Coming up next, speaking of New York, should the state of New York use taxpayer money to educate inmates? It's a controversial topic. We'll debate it after this.